It's also the threat of jihad. We are constantly in Belgium on threat level 3. 4 is the maximum and we are constantly on level 3.
Van de Belgische staat en zij hebben 9 bollen gedaan, zogezegd 9 provincies. Inshallah binnenkort.
Brussels is changing beyond recognition. We've had some insane statistics come out recently that 1 in 10 children only in Brussels has both of their parents who are Belgian. Sam, tell me about the transformation of your country.
Almost 60% of the people in Antwerp has a foreign background. So we are already a minority in my own city, in Antwerp, where I live. Mass migration is always bad because it's always destructive for the society that is accepting the mass migration, and it's also destructive for the society that see all these people going away. For every jihadi attack that is committed, there are more than 10 that are foiled. If you really want to solve it, the problem really, then we need remigration, of course.
Are you scared?
No. I'd rather die than shut up.
My name is Stefan Tompson. I'm the founder of Visegrad24, and today I'm interviewing Sam van Rooy from Flanders, a member of parliament for Vlaams Belang. Sam?
Thank you for having me.
Brussels is changing beyond recognition. We've had some insane statistics come out recently that 1 in 10 children only in Brussels has both of their parents who are Belgian. So that's 10% of children in Brussels have 2 Belgian parents. Apparently 50% of the youth, 50% of under 18-year-olds are foreigners in Brussels. And you can see this with the naked eye as you walk through some neighborhoods. You can go to Grand Place, which is a beautiful main square, and it all sort of looks nice and touristy, but you walk a few hundred meters further to Molenbeek, and you're in a no-go zone. Sam, tell me about the transformation of your country.
Yeah, well, it's going really fast. The mass migration to Belgium and to many Western European countries, also like the Netherlands, started in the 60s because the government and also companies wanted cheap labor.
Sure.
So they started importing mass amounts of temporary labor.
Sure.
But they never went back. And most of them were Moroccans and Turks,
sure.
Also some Italians and Greeks, etc. But of course they stayed and they got a lot of children, and the mass migration never stopped. We had many waves of mass migration the last 60, almost 70 years actually. And of course that is changing our demography and changing our culture. And then you get indeed the numbers that you are referring to, not only in Brussels, but in Antwerp where I live.
Sure.
Almost 60% of the people in Antwerp has a foreign background.
Wow.
So we are already a minority in my own city, in Antwerp,
wow.
where I live. But let me add to that the fact that they have a foreign background in itself is maybe not the biggest problem. It depends on which background they have, of course, because in Antwerp, almost 60% has a foreign background, and of that 60% almost half is Muslim. So
wow.
It's almost 30% that is Muslim. In Brussels, it's already more than 30% that is Muslim. And of course, that is the huge problem. That brings Islamization, as I call it, transforming our society, our culture, our neighborhoods, whole areas actually becoming more and more Islamized, meaning that our European Western culture and civilization disappears and is replaced by Islamic traditions, Islamic rules, Islamic laws, which is of course horrible because first of all, I don't want my culture to disappear.
Why is it horrible? If I were a liberal, this is where I would say, well, what's the problem with all of this, Sam?
Well, first of all, I would say that we have a culture and a civilization that is unique in history and in the world, and is something to be very proud of. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, equality of men and women, democracy, etc., etc. It's unique. It's so unique, and we need to be very proud of because it's amazing. It's great. It is the reason that we can have this interview now at this moment. So I love it, and I want to preserve it, and I don't want to see that is being replaced by a culture that is totally different. Not the Chinese culture, but especially not the Islamic culture, because the Islamic culture is not just totally different, it's also violent towards our culture.
But let me just ask you, would you also be opposed to mass migration from China, say?
Yes, for the reason that I just told you, or from India, or from Brazil, or from Russia.
Or from Poland.
Or from Poland, yeah.
And this is an argument that I often bring up when I'm accused of being some sort of racist for not wanting mass migration. I always come back to the same argument. I say, in 2004, when Poland and several other countries joined the European Union, the borders were opened. 2 million Poles thereabouts left from Poland, many of them to the UK, undercutting the white British working class in plumbing jobs, cleaning jobs, construction jobs, and essentially damaged the social fabric of that country because they damaged the working class. And more so, they did immense damage to Poland because these people were educated at the cost of the Polish taxpayer, left in their prime years, and left a demographic hole that to this day has not been fully replaced. It was bad for Poland, it was bad for the UK,
Exactly.
and it was generally,
Exactly.
we're not talking about, thousands of migrants. We're talking about mass migration, and especially when we talk about third world countries, I think the strongest argument is many times the people who are leaving those third world countries really are the most qualified. They're nurses in some cases, doctors in some cases. Do we really want a brain drain from those countries that will make the situation there that much worse in places that are already bad?
Yeah, that's also a very good argument. I mean, do we really want that doctors, lawyers, engineers from, for example, Afghanistan and Pakistan, do we want them to come here and make Pakistan and Afghanistan even worse? Of course not. These people, these educated people, they are needed there
100%
to build these countries and to make these countries
Sam,
better.
I think very specifically this argument is particularly strong with Syria.
Exactly.
Where the middle managerial class was the one that could afford to pay the human smugglers the $1,500 or so dollars it took to cross the Mediterranean and go to Greece. And those people today are not there to rebuild that country. And it's a disaster.
It's a disaster. And we can conclude that apart from which culture or which country the mass migration comes from, mass migration is always bad. Because it's always destructive for the society that is accepting the mass migration. And it's also destructive for the society that see all these people going away. Yeah.
You talked specifically about Islamization and the Islamization of Belgium. You're a member of parliament. You have seen your city be transformed over the last few decades. Tell me about some specific examples from Belgium that international viewers might not be familiar with of what Islamization means. We've talked about it conceptually. Tell me what it means in practice.
Well, in practice, you can see it with your own eyes to start with. If you walk through the Islamizing or Islamized neighborhoods in Antwerp, in Brussels, you can walk there for minutes and minutes and minutes, and you only see Islamic symbols. You only see Islamic stores, halal stores, mosques, Quranic schools, hijabs, very little girls with hijabs also. And that is not our culture anymore. That is what you see visually. But on the background, what we don't see behind the curtains or in the houses, and in the schools also, you see that Islamic rules and laws and traditions are being enforced to anyone there. Also, the moderate Muslims who maybe want to eat during Ramadan or maybe want to drink alcohol, they also have problems with the radical elements or the fundamentalist elements in the Muslim communities to tell them, if you drink, you're a bad Muslim. If you eat during Ramadan, you're a bad Muslim. That is Islamization. It's also very bad for the people who are grown up, who are growing in a Muslim community, but want to be Western, want to be secular. They are also a victim of that Islamization. And we see, for example, people who want to leave Islam, they are unable to do that. I know many people, I know quite some people in that case, they want to leave Islam.
And apostasy in Islam is punished by death.
Exactly. And they don't dare to say it, they don't dare to do it, and they lead often a double life, and they get death threats. If the family or members of the community know it or suspect it, then they get death threats. And that is something that 50 years ago, it didn't exist in Belgium or in Europe, that sort of horrible tyranny, because that's what it is. It's tyranny.
In the UK, one of the most famous examples, sort of side effects or effects, however you want to call it, of mass migration was the majority Pakistani-issued grooming gangs that abused large numbers of girls.
Yeah.
In France, there's several famous incidents: the massacre of Charlie Hebdo, Nice massacre, the Bataclan massacre, the beheading of Samuel Paty, a teacher who taught laïcité at school and was then reported by a girl and ended up being beheaded by a member of the Muslim Brotherhood from Chechnya. Could you give us some examples? These are very famous examples, and these are just the first off the top of my head. Could you give us some examples of some of the more horrific things that have happened as a consequence of the Islamization of Belgium?
Yeah, the jihadi attacks we had in Brussels on March 22, 2016. 32 people got killed by suicide bombers.
And see, I didn't even remember this.
Well,
it wasn't the first thing that would have come to mind. That's how many of these attacks we've had.
It's numerous, and this is the biggest one we had in Belgium.
Sure.
But we had numerous smaller jihadist attacks with one victim, two victims. It's a whole list, and it's not just that. It's also the threat of jihad. We are constantly in Belgium on threat level 3, which is 4 is the maximum, and we are constantly on level 3. It means that we never go back to normal again, which is 0.
Of course.
And that is Islamization, that you have so many jihadists or potential jihadists in your country that that the threat of having a jihadist terror attack is all-time high. And yeah, that's also in other countries. It's even worse. I think in France, you see that synagogues, they need to be protected by heavily armed police officers constantly, or Jewish schools. That are symptoms of Islamization, that you cannot live freely anymore in a normal way without heavy police protection. The Christmas markets, the same in Germany. I mean, we had some attacks there also, and yeah, that is the violent symptom of Islamization. But I'm actually more worried about the cultural and the demographical Islamization, because the violent Islamization is illegal, and with good police work we can catch them, and that happens also. I mean, for every jihadi attack that is committed, there are more than 10 that are foiled or that failed. So that is, I don't say it's easy, but that is doable by the intelligence services and the police. But the cultural Islamization, the demographical Islamization, that happens within the boundaries of our legal framework. It's not illegal to spread Islam because we have freedom of religion. It's not illegal to have mosques, to have Quranic schools, and to preach things that are, of course, horrible. That's not illegal. We have freedom of speech. So that is the legal Islamization, which is a much bigger threat, because that is killing our society. Stealth jihad is a word that is used for that, I think, by the Arabist Robert Spencer.
Wow.
He uses the word stealth jihad. And that is the biggest threat we are facing.
It's very unusual to speak to a politician who speaks with such, I'm looking for the right word, but is so open to talking about these problems and of being so vocal about calling these things out. Most politicians are afraid, and partially, I believe, on one hand, afraid because of the boundaries set up by political correctness, the fear of being cancelled by the left on one hand, and on the other hand, the genuine fear of ending up beheaded or murdered or attacked by an Islamist. What are some of the consequences that have affected you of being an open critic of the Islamization of Belgium? How has that impacted your life, your family life, what's been the effect?
Of course, I get a lot of hate messages online from Muslims, and also death threats. That happens quite often, actually, and sometimes I take it seriously. I see that I have to take it seriously. I go to the police. Often I think, okay, it doesn't look that serious. I don't go to the police. I also cannot go to the police every day, right? I mean, I have other things to do, so I have to pick my battles.
Of course.
But honestly, I'm not going to complain about that, because there are people dying literally because of Islamization and Islamic jihad. And with me, so far, it's words, it's hate, it's threats. But I look at people in the world who are fighting Islam, like the Iranian people, for example.
sure.
At this moment, these are the real heroes because they are risking their life to go demonstrate on the streets of Tehran, and they risk that they are being shot in the head or that they're being tortured. And so to answer your question, these are the people we have to speak out for these people, and that is what I'm doing every day on social media and also in the parliament. The Persians fighting Islamic Jihad, the Assyrian Christians, the Druze, you name all these minorities in the Middle East who are a victim of Islamic Jihad and Islamization, and yeah, it means that we have to do something now, or we will become like the Middle East here. We see the symptoms. We see it in the streets in these Islamized neighborhoods that it looks already like the Middle East. And if we don't make fundamental change in the policies, it will become like the Middle East. And we will get Iranian circumstances here as well. I mean, in Belgium and in the west of Europe. And I'm very worried about that. And the people who convince me of that scenario, you know who these people are? It's the people who migrated from the Middle East, who are not Muslim, like my wife, for example. She's from Iran. They experienced Islamic Jihad and Sharia law, and they migrate here. They come for our freedom, and they tell us, what are you doing? You are allowing your country and your civilization to become Islamized, just like the country that I had to leave behind. Iran, for example, or Turkey, or you name all these countries. I mean, the Islamic world used to be non-Islamic. Let us never forget that. It used to be Buddhist, it used to be Hindu, it used to be Christian, you name it. But
Zoroastrian.
Zoroastrian, good. Yeah, you know the history. I can feel good. Yeah.
Geert Wilders and Ayaan Hirsi Ali lived and still live for decades now under permanent police protection. Thierry van Gogh was murdered by an Islamist out in the open. I went to the place where he was killed. I travelled there and I went to pay my respects to this great freedom fighter for freedom of speech. Because
Exactly.
fundamentally, though I disagreed with the style of the messaging, if no one is doing it,
Exactly.
then that freedom of speech that is not being exercised, is it really there?
Exactly.
And so he sort of sacrificed his life for that. Are you scared?
No.
Not
I'm
at all.
No. My parents are scared for me, and they tell me that often. They tell me often, please watch out. If you go out, watch your back. But I'm not scared. I cannot explain why I'm not scared. But yeah, I hope I will never get scared. But to be really honest to you, and that's not to act tough or anything, I'd rather die than shut up. Okay? I mean that. If I cannot say what I really think and what I want and what I believe in, then I rather not live. I mean that. But let's hope it never comes to that.
I certainly don't wish you the death of a Samuel Paty or of Père Hamel, who was also beheaded in his church, or of Sir David Amos, the British MP who was stabbed to death.
It's a whole list. It's a whole
list. And these are just the top of my mind.
Yes, exactly.
And it's so easy to call these names because there's so many of them.
But it's also easy to forget them because there's so many, and time flies, you know.
Like the 2016 attack, when you had to bring that back, and you know, it's quite terrifying that it's only been 10 years, not even. And we're just so used to it.
Yeah. And can I add one more thing? What is a big concern of me is the people who do shut up. They self-censor themselves. Yes. Cartoonists, writers.
Charlie Hebdo, who caved in many ways. Charlie Hebdo was at the forefront of free speech. They published a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad. Then they decided, after this immense sacrifice of the entire editorial board was massacred by Islamists. And now you're going to shut up. The Islamists won.
Yeah, they won. And
they won.
And they live in a bunker now. Eh? The redaction of Charlie Hebdo, it's really a bunker, literally. But I know of so many cartoonists and stand-up comedians also in Belgium and in Holland. They literally say, we don't make jokes about Islam anymore because we don't want to risk the safety of themselves, but especially they always mention their family, you know, and I cannot really blame them. I mean, I think you need to be courageous, but I understand that you don't want to risk the safety of your children, for example. So I do understand, but that is our society, our free society, that is dying. If people stop saying things or stop writing things because they are afraid for their safety or the safety of their wife and children, that means that the free society is dying.
And this leads me perfectly onto another question that I have. There's been an initiative in the European Parliament by Charlie Weidemers from the Swedish Democrats, by Emmanuel Fragkos from the Greek Solution, to ban Al Jazeera and Al Jazeera Arabic. We've seen a nexus. There's a nexus of Qatari state-funded media, so that being, of course, the Al Jazeera, the AG Plus, and all of their immense pro-Islamist propaganda operations. On the other hand, the content creators, the Mohammed hijabs, for example, in the UK, and other Islamist content creators pushing certain narratives and radicalizing the minority, the Muslim minority that currently most Europeans have. We talked about freedom of speech and the ability to have a discussion, the ability to exchange ideas, the ability to disagree and to both of us leave and not murder each other.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think about banning Islamist operations, for example, Al Jazeera?
I think it's necessary, but let me add to that, because I wrote a book about Islamization, and my conclusion is the following. If we allow Islamization to grow even more than now, then we will end up in a society in which we only have two options left. Or a secular dictatorship in which freedom of speech and freedom of religion is not that free anymore, to suppress Islamization and Sharia law, or Sharia law. That will be the two only options we have left if we allow mass immigration of Muslims to continue, and if we allow Islamization to spread even more. Democracy will not be possible anymore. And the best example of this theory is the Middle East.
Of course.
Because there you only have these two options. You cannot make a democracy anymore in all these countries that have been Islamized. Look at Iran, for example. Let's say that the people win and that the Islamic regime is finally overthrown. If you do a democracy there, if you build a democracy there like we have in the West, then you will see sooner or later, again, the Ayatollahs will come back, again, an Islamic regime will come back, because they use and they misuse and abuse democracy. They're doing it already here, but in the Middle East.
They're doing it.
Remember when Egypt, the so-called Arab Spring,
of course.
Egypt, who came into power? The Muslim Brotherhood.
Of course.
Democracy brought the Muslim Brotherhood into power. So that is what I fear for our free Western democracies, that we will also end up in this Middle Eastern scenario, that we can choose only between a secular dictatorship and an Islamic dictatorship. And I don't want any of that. I want a free democracy. But we won't have that choice anymore, I think, if Islamization continues like it is now.
This reminds me of a great quote by a man who was called the dictator, and it probably was, a man called Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, who said, in a multicultural and multi-ethnic society, people no longer vote according to their economic interests, but along religious and ethnic lines. Yeah. And there's great wisdom in that. Yeah. Sam, we've identified some of the problems. You're a politician. Your job isn't really to identify the problems. Your job is to fix them.
Well, both. Both. First, we need to identify them, because the mainstream media is not doing that.
In an ideal scenario, Vlaams Belang takes power tomorrow. How do you solve the problem that Belgium has?
The first step needs to be to stop mass migration, because the problems that mass migration of the last 60 years has caused these problems are already so huge that we need to try to solve them first. And if we allow mass migration to continue, the problems only get bigger. So we need to stop that. And that will already be a very difficult task, of course. I mean, not only the illegal mass migration we have, but also the legal mass migration.
The legal one is in many ways more problematic, because the illegals are there illegally. You have the right.
Exactly.
And theoretically, because we're seeing what's happening in the United States of America, where there is a democratic mandate for Trump to carry out the deportations of illegals.
Exactly.
And he's not being allowed to even do that.
No.
The illegals cross the border with no due process, and on their way out, they abuse our democracies and say, where is my due process?
Yeah.
Give me my due process. Yeah. On what basis? You crossed the border illegally. Whereas with the legals, the legal migrants, especially in the second and third generation, and this is sort of where I'm going with the question is obviously one that most politicians avoid because it's a deeply uncomfortable topic.
Yeah.
The word of the year, according to the Financial Times for 2025, was remigration. You smile.
Yeah, because that is what is actually, if you really want to solve it, the problem really, then we need remigration, of course. But let me add to that, because of course mainstream media and politicians are framing this word already in a nasty way, like we would want to kick out everyone with an immigrant background. And that's of course not true. What remigration means, at least for me, is that the people with an immigrant background that don't want to integrate, or they are not able to integrate because they are, too stupid. That also exists. It's not only that they don't want, it's also that they're not able to integrate.
That is correct.
Economical integration, cultural integration. If one of these two...
Economic integration, very strong.
Of course.
If someone's abused the system, and unfortunately to pinpoint to one specific group of people where the statistics are available, and the Danes are one of the only European countries to publish statistics according to race, the Somalis are costing the Danish taxpayer an absolute arm and a leg.
Exactly.
And providing very little in exchange.
Yeah, exactly. The balance is like...
not looking great.
No,
it's not looking great for the Somali community in terms of what they're providing with Danish society. But sorry, Sam, I interrupted you.
No, it's very simple. These people, they need to leave. I mean, the people who are not willing to integrate economically, or are not willing to integrate culturally, they need to leave. But of course, that is, like you said earlier, it's so extremely difficult because these countries, they don't want them back.
They don't want them back.
They don't want them back. So it's actually for a big part too late.
Just to interrupt briefly, I spent some time in a very interesting place, Algeria. I spent some time in Algiers. I walked around the rough neighborhood, the Casbah, went there for a shisha. I happened to speak French, and I was there with one of my friends was the Polish ambassador at the time. And I spent some time there, and I drove around the country, and I spent a lot of time meeting with Algerian intellectuals and poets and writers. I always find that meeting with the poets of a country usually gives you a great sense of what the country's about. And one of the things that I would bring up was the Algerian minority in France. And none of the intellectuals and politicians that I met with in Algeria had any interest in bringing any of these people back. No. They were well aware that the people who had left were a true problem, and they did not want them back in Algeria. It was, and I was very young. I was very young at the time. It was fascinating.
We're stuck with them.
Yes.
That is the honest answer, that we're stuck with them. And that's why we need to stop more of that. And I think that is already the biggest task, to stop the mass migration. I cannot repeat that enough. And let's be honest, if we talk about immigrants who don't want to integrate, it's usually Muslims. It
tends to be the usual suspects.
With my party, Vlaams Belang, we actually always say there are three groups that we want to kick out of the country. Of course, the illegal immigrants.
Of course.
The immigrants who only want to abuse our social welfare system. And the Muslims who want to impose Sharia law or who want to commit jihadi attacks. Oh yeah, and there's a fourth group also, the criminals, the
goes without saying.
Yeah, it goes without saying. So, but yeah.
Is this achievable, Sam? That's my final question to you. Is all of this achievable?
Not in the European Union. That's another topic, of course, whether or not we should stay in the European Union. There's the Brexit, of course, for a good reason. But even if you would go out the European Union...
Brexit led to a staggering increase in migrants from non-EU backgrounds.
Yeah.
The net balance of migrants was, if you look at the chart is horrific. I mean, the wave of migrants from non-EU backgrounds that happens right after Brexit is just staggering.
Exactly.
It's horrifying.
Exactly, it's horrifying. And
the British people really voted based on sovereignty and based on migration being too high whilst they were in the EU.
Yeah.
And they were in many ways punished perhaps by the globalists who said, well, you don't like this, here you go.
Yeah. The only person I see really doing a good job now with mass migration and illegal migration is Donald Trump. He's doing a good job. He's the only one at this moment who dares to do what is necessary, that is building a wall, controlling, protecting the borders in a military way if necessary. Orban is doing that actually in Europe also, so I can name him as well. But they are the only ones.
That they're willing to impose force to defend the status quo in the law.
Exactly.
Because the majority, and this is, I think, my great indictment of the European people, Europeans have been so absolute in their cultural and civilizational victory that they have mistakenly accepted that the rest of the world is exactly as they are. Yeah. The blank state, the blank slate of all other people who can become model Europeans if only given the chance. You've mentioned Donald Trump, you've mentioned Viktor Orban, two men that are willing to use strength and force to impose the law. Yeah. Do you think that within our lifetime, we're both men of roughly the same age, do you think that we will see the changes that we desire to see in Europe in terms of at least protecting the indigenous and native people of our continent?
Well, I certainly hope so. And if my party could rule in Belgium or in Flanders, that would happen. But it's the voter who decides, of course. It's democracy, so we don't know. And what I also fear is that if you want to stay a free and a democratic country, then there are certain measures that you cannot take that we should take. For example, if you walk into certain Islamized neighborhoods and you see there that the women, for example, they're not allowed to go outside because of the brother and the husband. Yeah, what you should do there, actually, as a government, is you go drag out these guys and you force them to give freedom to their women. But that is unthinkable. In a free democratic society as ours. That's unthinkable. So it's insolvable, especially if you want to remain a free and democratic society.
And on that conundrum, Sanva and Rooy, thank you so much.